I normally mess up.
Well, it's all the checks we run these
Yeah.
days.
Okay, here we
I know
go,
it's good.
whenever you're ready, Gage.
I tried one once.
Hi, Tara.
Hello.
Good to see you. Thank you for joining us tonight.
I'm more than happy to. Are you guys
So-
waiting on me?
Nope.
No. we're
Okay,
waiting-
good. I was like,
No, we just can't start until the official hour
And elections.
and the live stream is up.
perfect.
We're all set now. So I'll just officially call this meeting to order. I'd like to just start by thanking everybody for your willingness to be here tonight. Tara and our budget committee members and our board chair and Stephanie, all of you, really appreciate you coming and participating in this. This important committee was part of our bigger plan for putting some financial oversight in place to try to avoid some of the things that happened before. This is one of the kind of the pillars of the plan we put in place. And citizen oversight is a critical piece of this, but it takes willing citizens to do it. So thank you for your time and for signing up for this. Really, really appreciate it. This is the first meeting of this committee. And so, we'll learn as we go. I'm sure some things will go fine. I'm sure there'll be some things we'll learn and want to improve. So just know we're open to feedback on how to make this process work better so that we can just get slicker and slicker each time we do it and make sure it's a meaningful conversation. That's really the goal. And with that, I think we should get started. I think we'll start with introductions. And so if you could just kind of say your name and your role in the district and things for folks at home and just for people here who might not know everybody, just so we're all on the same page. And Dr. Lyon will start with you.
Jeremy Lyon, Superintendent, Sherwood Schools.
Stephanie DeFoya, Fiscal Manager, Sherwood.
Gary Bennett, I'm the CFO of the district.
I'm Abigail Hawkins. I'm the board chair of the Sherwood School Board.
Matt Kaufman, I'm a budget committee member and then parent of a first grader and an incoming kindergarten.
Derek Thomas, I'm part of the budget committee and a parent of a senior at Sherwood High School.
Christine Andring, I'm the board secretary and the assistant to the superintendent, and I also do communications.
Great, thank you.
Garrett.
Chair.
Oh, sorry, Tara. My bad. I'm not used to the Zoom screen in meetings, please.
That's all right. My name is Tara Camp. I'm a partner with Polly Rogers and Company, and we are the financial statement auditors for the district.
Thank you. Sort of ironic that we're here to review the audit and I missed the person who conducted the audit. My apologies. So the next thing I'd like to do is, elect a chair to run the meeting. So do I have any nominations for chair?
Yes, I would love to nominate Matt Kaufman.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other nominations? Okay, second that. The three of you get to vote on that, so I like your odds, Matt.
All right, looks like the fix is in.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, so Chair Kaufman, I will turn it over to you. We kind of co-facilitate, but I'll turn it over to you to chair the meeting.
Perfect. So as far as the overview of the committee process, I thought it would be worth discussing briefly why we decided to have a committee like this and what the goals for meeting to go over the annual fiscal report should be.
I'm sorry, I have one thing I forgot to mention also. I put together and each of you have this as a handout. There's a statement within your paperwork that sat down with just a brief written purpose of the committee, some things about scheduling, timeline, and then some questions on the back that we can potentially ask later. So I just wanted to point that out. I forgot to do that before I turn it over to the chair to talk about this section of the meeting. So my bad.
Yes, so this is, do I need to read any of
No,
this?
you don't need to read it. You can share your purpose as you want. I just wanted to know that was out there for people to take a look.
Perfect. So I thought that there were really three reasons to convene a committee like this. The first is, we're all holding a copy of the annual financial report. It is, numbered. It's like
53.
I think it's 71.
71. Well, it starts over. That's why. That's why I'm foiled, but it's over 70 pages, a lot of tables, a lot of numbers, a lot of work goes into compiling this report. And so this is a prompt for us to read and review it, to kind of put the cap on one fiscal year and start the next. This meeting just kind of holds us all accountable. So it gives us a deadline to read the document and bring any questions that we have here to this committee to be answered by district administration. The second reason is that fiscal year 22-23 was a really difficult one for Sherwood School District. And there's an incredible amount of work that went into not only pulling this document together, but doing the hard work of financially administering a really challenging fiscal year. And so it's an opportunity for us to kind of reflect on that and to say that we appreciate it and that we are thankful to be in the position we are this year and the position we will this year. And then the third reason, kind of stemming off of that, is there is a lot of good information in this report, and having a time period where we review the report, we review the net financial position of the district, which is different from the budgetary reporting that we typically look at. It is a good check on what we're doing. And if we had been doing this in the years prior to 22-23, we may have been able to identify some of the problems that were happening. And by identifying them a little more quickly, we could take action before problems got to as big as they can. And so the goal is just to do this once a year, to meet, go over the report, ask any questions, and if there are issues that need to be raised, or if there are concerns that we want to take to the broader board, this is just kind of the canary in the coal mine spot to raise the alarm and inspire confidence for the broader community in the fact that we're double checking. Any other thoughts on the committee and what we're here to do? Or
So one of the things that I'd just like to kind of ask the question, I guess, and also ask this of our auditors also, since we've been used. Obviously, Matt, as we think about this subcommittee of the financial committee board, there's a lot of engagement that we've had with Dr. Ryan and Gary in the past year and the kind of situation right side of the ship. I see this committee, correct me if I'm wrong, there's also kind of another conduit to engage with the auditor more directly if there are matters of concern or issues that need to be brought to management's attention outside of the interactions we have as a board and budget committee as well. Is that a fair statement? And how should we think about that interaction?
100%. No, that is, I should have added that as well. We are going to, Gary's done a really good job of kind of asking around to some of our peer districts for some peer district best practices. And as part of the meeting, we're going to ask the superintendent to leave and then talk with the district administration. And we're going to ask the administration to leave and we're going to talk to the auditor. And that gives everyone a forum to raise a potential red flag or a concern, or just make sure that people are aware of something that may not have come through the public channel. And so that is definitely a part of what we're doing here.
And related to that, one thing I learned from our neighbors in Tiger 12 and have a good process that our auditor Tara actually referred me to. And when I looked at other districts, I actually like theirs probably the most. And one thing I liked was that their staff prepared some questions for the audit committee to ask. Of course, you can ask any question you would like. It's not a limitation on the question. It's just some guiding questions to walk through. And also they had that structure about staff leaving the room and the superintendent leaving the room, just to have a different conversation in case there was something that needed to be discussed that was significant. So I wanted to thank them for that and for Tara for sending us in that direction. That was very helpful, because it was planning something like this from ground zero didn't make any sense. It made more sense to see what other people have already done and replicated there. It's good.
Any other So we can move forward to the fiscal audit review with the district auditor.
All right, thank you. So what I usually start with in my review is going over the governing body letter. Do you have access to that letter? It's separate from the audit report.
Did not include that. It's not,
Just kidding.
I'm sorry, I did not include the governing body letter.
Okay. That's okay. I can just summarize key points in that letter. It's a nice letter that's issued with the audit. It's required to go to the governing body, and it really summarizes everything we're required to communicate with you. So I can just talk through it. It's no problem. You'll definitely get that when the audit's presented to the board. So first of all, we cover the purpose of the audit, and the purpose for the audit for the district is threefold. We perform the financial statement audit, and that is where we're testing the numbers and the note disclosures and the accounting and the financial statements that you see in that audit document there. Secondly, we perform a compliance audit as required by Oregon minimum standards for all governments in Oregon, and that's where we're looking at compliance with state law. And thirdly, we perform the federal single audit, and that is where we test different grants every year to determine compliance with the federal grant requirements, because all that federal money has a lot of strings attached and they all have to be followed. So covering the purpose of the audit, I think, is important because it kind of lays out where the bulk of our work happens. It's also important to note what our audit does not cover. Our audit ends as of June 30, 2023. So we don't look past that. So what's currently happening in the district, we have no idea. We also never look to the future. An audit always happens in the past. It creates the historical document. This is the results of the fiscal year. So we're not looking at future projections. We're not looking at budgeting. We're not looking at financial health. So I think those are helpful to know kind of like where the scope of our work lies. And then after we've covered the results of the audit, the purpose of the audit, we covered the results of the audit. So for the first one, the financial statement audit, we issued a clean opinion on the financial statements. That's an unmodified opinion with no reservations. That's very good. That's exactly what you're going for. For state minimum standards, that's the Oregon law compliance procedures. We found exceptions or issues requiring comment as noted on page 42 of that audit document you have. For the federal awards, we found no issues of non-compliance and no question costs. That's very good as well. And then as a management letter, we noted one material weakness and two significant deficiencies as noted in the schedule of findings and question costs in the report, and that's at the very end of the audit report. Other things that are important to note as part of our audit is the district implemented a new accounting standard for the audit that you have, June 30, 2023, and that is called GASB 96. And it changes dramatically the accounting for subscription-based information technology arrangements, which is all of your software and IT items. This was a huge undertaking that the district did. It was a ton of work and a lot of hours, and they did an excellent job implementing that. It was incredibly difficult for all governments during this year to implement that. We also note that we encountered no difficulties in performing and completing our audit. The staff was wonderful to work with. They were highly responsive. Things were ready when they were supposed to be ready. So the management of the actual audit process went excellent. And I want to thank Gary and Stephanie and all of your hard work and all of the staff for that, because it was an efficient audit process. The audit was issued by the deadline. So those are all things that lead to that. That was very good. Lastly, we had no disagreements with management over accounting and auditing issues, which we're required to communicate. And then in our letter, which you will see, we cover future accounting and auditing issues. There's always new standards coming out every year. Thankfully, We have a little bit of a break and only some minor standards coming out in the future. And we always work with the district to make sure that you know what's coming and that it can be implemented in plenty of time for the next audit. So that summarizes what we're required to communicate, and I'm happy to take questions or go over any of the details in more depth. I think your point was very good, that one of the greatest benefits of the Financial Oversight Committee is having more access and more time with your auditor to kind of go over things and talk about things, because when we do board presentations, it's a quick 10 minutes in, 10 minutes out. And usually we don't get many questions, so I encourage discussion over anything you like.
So I guess just as in kind of understanding the audit report without not yet reading the material, I'm assuming the material weakness is what we've been working through as a budget committee. Is that something that we can discuss here, or is that?
Yes, we can for sure discuss it here. No, the material weakness was,
It's on page 51.
Yeah, those start on page 51.
Just read.
yeah, let's make it try.
So the material weakness, it was the district recorded a material amount of state grant revenue as local. So basically it's a classification, or Tara, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's a classification issue within
Correct.
financial report.
Correct.
There was no operational.
No.
Everything was operationally correct, but when it came to reporting those numbers, it was in one column as opposed to another column,
Exactly.
which is, potentially material to an investor somewhere, but likely not material to a member of our community.
It's called a material weakness because the amount of that money was material to the financial statements, but you're exactly right. It was a classification error, and it wasn't a fund mismanagement error at all, because that would be a whole different finding.
So the funds were managed according to the
Yes.
grant guidelines. And this is a reconciliation learning for us. Account code errors can happen, and we need to change our reconciliation process with the state grants. And so one thing was, this was the first year we've actually done that reconciliation on our own. We had a consultant do it last year who did the work for us, but didn't really teach us how to do it. So we need to really learn how to do that reconciliation with this Form A-133 from the state. We did the reconciliation, but it's just something we need to make a couple of tweaks to and make sure we catch that error, because the issue to me is less that the error was made in the first place and more that a reconciliation didn't pick it out.
So I think it's important, because obviously I'm not a government accounting expert, but the use of material weakness in public companies is very meaningful, right? And so I think it's very important to make sure for those watching as well, that we understand if it's truly was just a classification issue and not a balance issue, that people understand that, because in public companies, you have a material weakness that can ultimately alter your stock price. I mean, that can derail a company for a while as they think about, did they report something, do channel stuffing that they shouldn't have, what have you. This purely sounds, just to clarify, it was a classification issue and not we recorded revenue we didn't have, or we spent revenue we shouldn't have, things like that, right?
And so Tara, just to clarify, so anytime there is an error in the financial report that's above materiality for the material threshold for the district, that automatically has to be a material weakness, correct?
Yes.
And so in this case, so that's where there's a wide range of material weaknesses, going from like, wow, you didn't keep track of anything all year long. All the way over to like, oh, it's in column B instead of column C. And and we're over in the column B, not column C end of the spectrum, correct, Jeff?
So the definitions for material weakness and significant deficiency are defined twice in the report. Once on page, 45, and once on page 48. The definitions are very similar to those of public companies. And what they say is it's an error that is found that could cause a material misstatement to the financial statements. So material weakness, there was a material misstatement to the financial statements. And like you said, in context, it's not like something was missing or something wasn't done. It was just on the wrong line, right? Significant deficiency is there's a possibility of a material misstatement, not necessarily that there was. So those are the kind of two distinctions. And it's good to know, like, all of these items that we found in our audit were corrected by management immediately. They did an excellent job of responding and correcting those. And also they have a very proactive approach of learning and understanding and asking questions and why and how do we prevent this in the future. I really like that. But it's just kind of the nature of our work. We come in as your examiners. We're like the teacher on finals day. When we find an incorrect answer, it's an automatic, mark against your grade. So that's why those findings come up. Even though this has all been corrected in the report is accurate.
Okay, thank you, that's helpful.
And so we feel like we have a good compensating control in place now. We learned a lot. I think it's also important to remember that our fiscal staff was under a lot of stress during the 22-23 fiscal year. And so, it's not obviously it would be great to have no issues at all, but it's understandable that a couple of I's may not have been dotted and T's may not have been crossed, just in the broader context of everything that was happening. And we use it as a learning experience. And this would be the sort of thing where if we were to see this again next year, then that becomes a lot more concerning, because then that's an indication that we're not fixing the process that underlies the report.
So I think that's a good way to think about that as well, because obviously we talked extensively about the additional changes you've made, the controls we put in place, the driving kind of out of the hole. There's bound to be some lower level details, misclassifications that, once you get down and start to peel away like an auditor will do, you'll see that some of those things, after you take care of the bigger pieces that you've been focused on, really what's the point, right? So that lines up well with the broader story. This isn't something that's now the result of everything you put in place, we're still doing wrong. If I'm understanding correctly, right?
Yes.
Yeah, no relation
No.
to any of the issues prior.
We are on this one. We will take care of this. We will shore this up. And this one will not pop up again.
I believe that. Can I ask a question, being the only non-financial person in this room, except for you? What, and I'm he's probably like, I'm curious. When we talk about the material threshold, is that a certain dollar amount?
It
And
is. So it's actually a few different dollar amounts, because there's different materiality points depending on which page you're looking at in the report. Because if you're looking at the statement of net position, which is the entire district as a whole, with everything combined, all the funds into one column, all the capital assets, all the long-term debt, that materiality number is a lot higher than if you're looking at like the general fund column or the special revenue fund column. So it depends where we're looking. The number is established by industry standards with these formulas that everybody uses, and they change every year based on the activity that's going on in the district. So, 1 year, maybe at the high amount, $50,000 could be material. The next year it could be 30. So it definitely changes based on activity. And there's also, that's the quantitative part of materiality. There's also qualitative, which is the non-number factor. So for example, if an account is more sensitive than another account, it's going to have a lower materiality threshold. So for example, if you think of a line in your financial statements called accounts payable, that's not as sensitive to get 100% right than it is cash, because everyone wants to know what the cash is and they want that to be accurate. So those two lines are also going to have a little bit different materiality thresholds depending on those qualitative factors. So does that help?
I don't know if it helps anybody at home, but I'm following what you're saying.
And the idea, Tara, just to make sure that this is really clear for anybody who may be watching now or in the future, but the idea is to kind of scope out transactions that would
Yes.
not be material to a decision that someone would make. You know, if we're talking about a $2 million account balance, like we're not gonna like really nitpick a $5
Right, it's
expense in that
in
account.
proportion.
It's just to try to draw a line and say above this line,
Yeah,
these are things that might change decisions people would make, and below this line, it's just not gonna change what someone would do using the.
yeah, that's an excellent point because it's a big factor in our testing. An audit never tests every transaction. So we have to pick and choose what is important and what is sensitive. And a lot of that's done on a risk assessment basis. And materiality definitely plays a role in that. So that was a good point.
Thank you.
Any other questions on material weakness? So we should probably talk about the two deficiencies also. So the first sufficient significant deficiency, which just to remind everybody is not a material, it isn't an error, it's a potential. There's the potential for there to be an error. During our testing of capital assets, we noticed the district did not include all current year capital assets in the capital asset register. What was the reason for assets existing outside the capital asset register?
I think they just weren't all captured. So when we go in and do our testing, we're looking at different account codes and different line items and transactions that happen. And we compare all, the yearly transaction to what's in the capital asset register. That's kind of how we test the register for completeness. And we noted perhaps these areas weren't captured. And so I brought that to Gary's attention. I said, I think this is missing stuff. And he took that back, reviewed it, corrected it, and then returned it to us.
But then that's kind of another reconciliation. So it's just like the fixed asset register wasn't reconciled. So the financial statement account was correct, but it just wasn't reconciled to the fixed asset register.
Well, there's a couple different financial statement accounts. In the fund accounting, in your general fund, capital projects fund, there's capital outlay expenditure. That was correct. Then outside the GL, there's the capital asset register. That was the one that wasn't correct because it didn't take all the GL information into account. Does that make sense?
And just to make sure that everybody is clear at home, the GL account is the one where we are buying.
Yes.
That's where the cash is being monitored. So this doesn't have any issue with the cash itself. It's just the kind of depreciation in the asset register. It's the downstream accounting issue. There was cash or asset misappropriation risk. Perfect. Any questions on this one?
No, just we have a solid plan in place to correct this one. There was a couple things that we needed to improve and shore up, but we are on it. If you'd like to know what they are, I'd be happy to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be helpful. It sounds like, and I just want to make sure I'm clear. So there was a couple of significant deficiencies. It wasn't just one, right? So it was the other one, were they both related to the coding of capital assets, or was it something else in conjunction with that as well?
The third one is the next page on page 52, and that is regarding the recording of debt. So
just for anybody who's at home. So the third one was during our testing of debt, the district did not record the addition of new debt as proceeds required by generally accepted accounting principles.
Yeah, that is a very unique governmental accounting requirement that you're not going to see anywhere except governmental accounting. But when new debt is issued, it is required that the proceeds are recorded in the funds so that you can show the inflow of resources, which is the debt. And so that's the part that was missed. The actual debt schedule, which is reported, was correct.
So just to, does that clarify? And so then just to kind of summarize, and then I'll open up for one last question. So these were three issues, and they're real issues that we want to be corrected, and we don't want to see recur in the 23-24 audit. But all of these relate to how the district reported in the annual fiscal report, and there was never any risk to district funds or district assets or any sort of operational discrepancy.
No, these are accounting and reporting items. That's the most common type of finding an auditor has, because that's where we live in the accounting, looking at all the different accounting and the transactions and how it's recorded. It definitely had nothing to do with misappropriation of assets, with fraud, with anything that we would consider to be unethical in any way. So it is more just, procedural items.
Any other questions there? So before we go, there were I had a couple other questions for you. And then I'll open it up for, does anybody mind if I go first?
No.
And then the first one, I mentioned in your letter, implementation for GASB 96. And I saw in the financial report the long list of software releases that we have. And I saw there's a couple, looks like risk disclosures like on the agenda for next year. And one of the things that just knowing how busy our fiscal staff is with the kind of operational tasks that the board puts to our fiscal task or to our fiscal staff, I would be mindful of kind of minimizing the reporting burden that we put on them for some of these, the GASB gets bored every year and has to come up with a couple new standards for everybody to go out and implement. And so are there ways, either with how we report subscription-based technology or report risk disclosures, are there potential ways for us to choose my words really carefully, but to fully comply with the expectation, but to not overinvest in compliance that is not really being asked for anybody on our side of the table?
I think that's a really smart question to ask and to continually ask, because the burden on business offices has increased dramatically in the last few years. And this is because of the GASB is not stopping. They're just issuing standard after standard after standard. And it's a problem. Not only that, with different state and ODE requirement reportings, and also a lot more federal requirements and reporting. So the work is just exploded, and we're seeing very, very common to see overworked and kind of like overwhelmed business offices and finance offices, even outside of school districts. So it's important to assess, do we have enough staff to do the job correctly? Is there anything we can cut out? Like you said, that we remain in compliance, but it might not be exactly required. So those are excellent questions, but I think it's more of a management question, because part of our audit was we do not audit efficiency of operations. Regarding the GASB 96 disclosures, it added a lot of pages to the report, right? It starts on page 20 and goes through, 30 to 31.
20.
Oh yeah, 29 to 31. All of that information, it can definitely be more summarized in the report, but it still all has to be prepared by the district so we can pull out the summary information that we need.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I looked through here, like I saw, like one of these is for like $670. Do we have to go into that much detail, or is there can we set a threshold for
Or
some of these things?
very unique to GASB 96 and 87, the GASB has come out and said, unlike capital assets, because capital assets has a threshold, right? The district doesn't capitalize every tiny little thing because that's not efficient. So the GASB allows capital assets to have a threshold. They do not allow debt to have a threshold. So what they have said, because the leases and the subscription-based information technology are accounted for similarly, with that debt side of it. If your in total amount is material, then you have to record everything. You can't pick and choose how you're treating different items. Does that make sense?
It doesn't, your explanation makes sense, but
Yeah.
the what is being explained doesn't necessarily.
No, I agree with you. There's been so much frustration about these standards, and a lot of pushback about it. And even in the standard itself, in the standard, it's like a lot of pages. And the beginning, they always summarize the process and the feedback they got. And so before they even get into the standard, they go through several pages of like, this was feedback and this is what the board thought. This was feedback and this is what the board thought. And one of the very specific parts of feedback was the intention of the standard should be record large IT projects, not the little tiny Zoom subscription that people have. And the board specifically said, we disagree with that. It should cover everything. So it's kind of like we're at the mercy of them.
Okay, well, that makes perfect,
Mhm.
that's perfect sense, that is very helpful. And I guess maybe I'll just leave that question with a kind of broader statement from the committee to both the district administration and to our auditor. If there are ways that we could do things more efficiently without compromising any source of information that people in the Sherwood community are asking for, this would be a good one to bring some of those things and for us to be able to sign off on finding efficiencies in what the GASB wants us to do so that we can get us done what Sherwood wants us to do. The other, so we I do I wanted to just call attention at the end of the document, there's a discussion of the fiscal staff did remediate, so on page 53. At the end, the very last page. The fiscal staff did remediate an issue that was identified in the prior year and that didn't occur this year. So I just wanted to call everybody's attention to that and to say that we have a track record of when issues are identified, they get fixed, and then we track that in the following year. So Kara, thank you for following up on that. And many thanks to everybody at the district office who worked on pulling that together. I guess the two things that I had a question on, so there is a lot of disclosure in this document on cash and investments that are held by the district. Do we have a formal cash and investment policy or treasury policy?
We do have a formal investment policy. And it's a fairly lengthy policy, actually. It states a lot of things. I think the key to it for our purposes is it states there are things outside of this we can invest money in, and it specifies if we're going to buy bonds and things like that, specifically what the rate, what the length of the term, maturities, and all those things. But all of our funds are invested in LGIP accounts, the Oregon Short-Term Fund, Oregon Short-Term Fund, or they're in a bank deposit that's collateralized. And so that's where all of our money is. We're in the safest possible investment. We do have opportunities to go out and be a little bit more aggressive, but with the rates we're earning, we've chosen not to pursue any of those because we're earning, last month we earned 5% on that account, and that's pretty darn good.
5% for no risk is.
5% for
that's
no
a-
risk, and so it's just a no-brainer, so we just keep our cash balances low in the bank and high as we can in those and try to earn as much interest as we can, and we are in compliance with that policy.
Perfect. And then, there's also a lot of disclosure around capital assets. But I don't know if capital, like, so I know, there's just a lengthy discussion of capital assets, the last school board meeting. They came to present,
Last one.
was that the last meeting or on the?
Oh, the long range.
Yeah, the long
Okay,
range.
so, yeah.
So, capital assets are typically discussed by the broader school board and not necessarily this committee. Or is that something I should think about, or?
I think so. I think that's something we'll need to discuss. We're putting in place. We're working on right now. It's not really a long range capital improvement plan. It's really a better title would be a long range capital maintenance plan. And just really taking a look at what kind of, we do not have sufficient funds in our bond funds to, deal with maintenance going forward. We've got turf fields to replace, we've got buses to replace, we've got HVAC units that, are failing, and nothing out of the ordinary. But we do need a plan to make sure we have sufficient capital to replace them. We have some capital now, and so a long range plan will allow us to start setting funds aside, so we have a ramp pay for it, not hitting a wall where all of a sudden we need a bunch of cash. Does that make sense? And so we're working on that right now, and that might be something this committee should discuss. I don't know. It will certainly go to the board at some point in time. I wish I had a direct plan for what to do with it, and we've kind of penciled the logistics of it together, but you'll be seeing it in some shape or form for the end of the school year. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, and so then I guess just to put a cap on that, I could see the cash and investments, but that's something to review periodically. This would be a place to start that, maybe deeper dive. But those to the board, but capital assets kind of key as the capital maintenance fund gets developed and circulated. Those were my questions on the annual financial report. The last thing we should probably note is, despite all of the challenges last year, our net financial position improved by $5 million. And so many thanks to everybody here in the room, as well as to the teachers and staff and administrators who were all a part of making that happen, and the really hard work of getting that turned around. So many thanks to everybody who's involved. Any other questions on the financial report or things before we go to the kind of list of questions?
For me.
All right, so we'll kind of wrap things up by walking through some of these peer district questions just to see if these are helpful.
Yeah,
For
and
us
I would
or
like
not.
some feedback on if this is helpful. There's other questions we should ask in the future, things we should regularly bring back. Part of what I think is important here that I didn't say in my opening comments is that, I would like to create sort of an institutional process that all of us will come and go, but it would be good if we set a process in place that lived on and becomes part of the institution. And so if we can have a grounded set of questions that are useful to ask each year, I think that would be a really powerful tool to have. So
I guess I have one question that, I just see them kind of on the agenda. I don't know if we're skipping over or if maybe some bit in here, but as far as 6, I want to make sure we give Gary kind of, there is kind of a line item here for just talking through the corrective action plan. We feel that we understand that sufficiently, and or I think part of this subcommittee can be, continue to say, how can we help? Where's that cap at as far as your progress, how it's kind of rolling out.
I'd be happy to talk with you about what the corrective action plan is. So they're both relatively straightforward, and honestly, so the first one with the capital assets, not getting all the capital assets in the capital asset register. One challenge was we just had some things that were capital assets that weren't coded as capital assets. And so I put together a training. I worked with Angie Peterman, who's a retired business official who's pretty strong. She helped me put together a training for staff to make sure we're crystal clear. And so all the people who will be coding assets and the fiscal team will make sure we shore that up first. And so people who are actually coding the assets in the first place, make sure that's correct. Make sure the fiscal team's all on board so they're looking for it. So we'll shore that up. That will help. The broader problem was also that I just did not do a broad enough search in the ledger for all the capital assets, and I missed some. And so the correction is twofold. It's learning the places that they were sitting that I missed last year and coding them correctly and making sure to do a more thorough review. The other thing is we're going to start trying to reconcile our capital assets on more on a quarterly basis instead of leaving a huge chunk at the end of the year, which I think was I don't know if it's a rookie move or what you want to call it, but it was a lesson learned.
Well,
of
that's a
that.
firefighting, yeah, to a large degree last year, right? So, I think that makes sense.
So I think that one is, and looking back, I can see that it's pretty clear what I need to do, if that makes sense, in terms of reconciling that. In terms of, the way the finance debt was, the way that we recorded the debt, that's really just a simple accounting change that we need to make. It's pretty straightforward. We're both on board with it. Tara helped us understand exactly what we needed to do, which was pretty straightforward. We do need to make sure we have a clear piece in our process, though, that when we purchase something like a bus, you know, when we get the financing and the bus arrives, not only does it need to go into the insurance, into our insurance fleet, into our bus fleet, and all that capital assets register and all that. I also need to make sure to let Stephanie know that, hey, we received these 2 buses. Here's the financing documents. Let's go through the process and report them. So I think there's a process issue there that needs to be shored up too. I don't know that it was or it wasn't. We just need to be clear on that and make sure we have a procedure for that. And so we put that in place as well. So I think these are relatively narrow problems, meaning they're pretty defined. I don't think they're like systemic problems.
Expensive implementation or process redesign.
I don't think it's anything like that. I think it's just making a few tweaks. We should be able to shore this out.
Okay,
Thank you for coming back to that.
no, that's helpful, thank you.
Anything else? So to start, I do think these first 2 are important questions for us to consider, and kind of the reason that this committee exists, or this committee is being started. The first one are published financial statements, or the financial statements published by the board sufficient for the board and the community. Tara has thankfully let us know that they are sufficient for the capital markets in the state of Oregon and any other external requirements that we require to have. Not sure the resulting report is super legible to the broader community. It's a pretty in detail accounting document. So
I was also referring to just even the monthly financial reports and the regular reporting to the board. Like maybe a bigger picture than just the audit, the things that need to be included that you're not seeing that you'd like to see. That's the question to all of you.
I think from my perspective, the monthly reporting that we typically are seeing now, at least for my eyes, is understandable. And I can track it pretty easily. I mean, this is a very dense document that I can tell for you guys is easier to pick apart than it is for myself. So I'm sure for somebody at home, this would be, it's complex.
yeah.
And you know, you kind of get mixed in between like, wait, what account are we talking about now? But I think the month-to-month stuff that we're doing is definitely improved and is easier to read for sure. I mean, for these guys, it's gonna be easy to read anyway.
And very helpful. So I remember I did start, like I think I had 1 meeting before Gary came on, and I remember it being much more difficult, or much more difficult to really wrap my head around what was happening and how it related back to the audited financial information, so I've been really impressed by the iterations on our financial reporting practice that's taken place over the last year.
Let me know if that changes.
Let
Let me know if there's something else you need realistically. I mean, that's an important
Well, and I do think pivoting into the second bullet point, or the second question, have community members, stakeholders, staff, or others requested other information about financial issues or processes? I know one thing that I have either talked to people about or overheard people, sitting in Panera, overheard people talking about is the bond levy funding. And just as a reminder to everybody, this document ends on June 30, 2023. So there was no bond levy at the time that this report, or as of the date this report is issued. So next year, when we're meeting, that will be a part of what we're talking about. And I could see there being a need for some additional reporting above and beyond, just the formal GASB requirements to make it really clear to people that we are tracking that those funds just as diligently as we're managing the rest of our funds, as well as making it really clear to members of the community what those dollars are being used for. It's not just getting thrown into a pot and disappearing with nobody really understanding what it makes paid for.
That's a great point, actually, because I think that was also part of, you even said that at the outset. This past year when we started the budget committee, that was one of the things we wanted to put about, making sure that the dollars are transparently tracked, right? So people really got comfortable with how we use it.
I think a function of this committee and my view of it and vision for it would be that this committee would issue a brief report to the community, likely next January, when we have audited financials available on how levy dollars were expended and just the general financial health of the district. Nothing extensive, something that people can read and consume, but written by a citizen group rather than by me, I think is an important function of this group.
Actually, Tara, related to that, because I know, just to reiterate to everybody, all of our peer districts have bond levies that they're using to fund their school operations. Do they report that as a separate fund? So is that like a special revenue fund in the financials, or does that just go into the general fund?
General fund. So if you look on page 10 of the audit, that is the general fund revenues and expenditures. And that levy will be reported with the other taxes in that taxes line. That's kind of the financial statement requirement of reporting like revenues together. So they're not separate. And part of a financial statement audit would not include the scope of looking into those. That would be something the district would look at a consultant for.
Right. No, that is very helpful.
Yeah.
Are there best practices from do other districts report on those?
Not that I've seen.
Are you aware of any?
I haven't seen them, but that doesn't mean they don't exist because we just don't consider that. Our testing for taxes has to do with, we actually receive confirmations from the county that they gave each school district this amount of money, and then we match that to your books so we can say that it's accurate. We don't look into how it's spent.
And we do have those in a separate sub-fund, Fund 101, the general fund, so they are tracked and accounted for.
Okay, so we're not required to track them separately, but we are going to, and we're gonna make we will figure out over the, I'm sorry.
While they are tracked separately, which I think is good, you have that sub fund, they'll be reported in the general fund because sub funds are never reported separately in a financial audit.
So as far as the audited financial or the annual financial report next year, it will just be included in the general fund, but we as a district are choosing to aggregate those funds in a sub account, so it won't be reported separately in the annual financial report, but we're tracking it separately because we want to be transparent with those dollars. And we will figure out a method of reporting that to the community that will meet our above and beyond transparency and accountability commitments that we're making beyond what the GASB, the GASB will tell us to report every lease down to the penny, but
Exactly.
not ask us to like give people the information that they actually need.
Exactly.
Perfect. So I will so
You want to move to questions to the auditor so that we can move through these bottom two sections and then let Tara go and then we can talk about the stuff up top?
yeah, I think that sounds, so should we ask, so should it just be the committee? Or are we
I think
doing
there's three
auditor with
questions for the
everyone?
auditor and then we'll leave and you can ask the following two questions.
Oh, that's how it goes. Okay, perfect. So questions for the auditor. Are there any reportable events or concerns that should be noted from the fraud questionnaires completed by staff as part of the audit?
No, we did not note any.
Are there findings in the audit that should be brought to the attention of this committee? And are there ones that we haven't discussed previously?
We have covered all.
We've covered all of them. Are there any other financial matters that we should be aware of or paying attention to?
Not that I can think of.
Or any other questions we should ask?
Just one other quick question, and obviously it's not necessarily the auditor's responsibility to opine on kind of the corrective action plans, but do you believe, based on your understanding of the corrective action plan as addressed with management, that it would achieve the purpose of the control if operating correctly this next year?
It definitely sounds like it will. Part of our requirements as auditors is for the next audit, we actually have to test to see if it's been implemented. And so that's why in the report, you see our little comment about the previous year's error, where we say it's been addressed. So we'll do the same thing for these.
Very good, thank you.
So now we will ask the superintendent to leave the room. Fine.
How far?
And then we'll ask the CFO and the fiscal manager if they have been asked to do anything related to district finances that made them uncomfortable or violated the law, or that the committee or the board should be aware of.
Yeah, not at all. Absolutely not. No, we're leaving the room.
Now you leave it.
Now we'll ask the CFO and fiscal manager to leave the room.
And there was 4.
And
Now
there was.
I'm gonna ask myself to leave the room.
Yeah.
Somebody let us know.
Exactly.
You guys want to
So
ask
we'll
me
go-
questions behind my back?
Second. Yeah. And then Tara, we'll just ask you, was there anything that you or your staff noticed over the course of the audit that this committee or the Sherwood School Board should be made aware of?
No, Gary is fantastic to work with. I think he's an excellent CFO manager. He really has a really good grasp of operations and what needs to be done. He's really forward thinking and very much into problem solving. I think he's a really good manager and a fantastic CFO. The one thing that is, I think, relevant to note, and he will tell you this, he's told me this many times, he's not an accountant, and that is an accounting position typically. And there are many non-accountant CFOs who are very successful, and I think Gary's one of them, but they usually typically will have a very strong accountant under them, either a senior accountant or controller position. And so that is something that the district has been talking about implementing for a couple of years. I think it's very wise to do that because that will really eliminate the accounting errors that come up every once in a while. So that's just something to consider. However, You know, all of the staff in the business office are excellent at what they do. We've worked with them a long time. They're highly conscientious. They care about their work. They want, to do everything correctly. So it's always been good to work with them, and we have no concerns about any of their performances or any issues that have come up.
Given that Gary's not an accountant, I mean, and I 100% agree with what you said, I mean, I think you can be very successful. Just a matter of getting the numbers in the right column, to a large degree, but, thinking strategically is very important, which is what we're, but that aside, obviously, in light of the question you also raised earlier, Matt, with the number of GASB pronouncements that continue to be published, every year, is there sufficient accounting and GASB expertise in order to ensure that financial statements are adequately prepared and published, that we're missing, that we need to think about?
I think it's irrelevant for everybody to think about. And that's definitely something that management should assess if they have that accounting expertise on staff.
Well, and I
So
guess about you as well from your interaction, do we have that? Do we have sufficient GASB skills on staff? Or is that something that this committee needs to think about, continue to help Gary address as well?
I think it's definitely important to think about. I don't know everybody's qualifications. So I think if I answer that, I can't answer it fully aware of everything, because we're not diving into people's qualifications and what they can or can't do. So you could have somebody on staff that's very qualified to do that. We just look at the results of the numbers and what's happening. So.
And then just to kind of clarify, so you can't necessarily say 100%, but you also feel pretty confident that it's not 0% and that we have.
Correct.
We're meeting the threshold, but we'll have to just keep an eye on whether we should invest over the next few years.
Yes, that's a good summary.
Well, and I think what you have to say very much parallels my experience working alongside Gary. I mean, he is a problem solver. He wants to do right. He always wants to learn from anything that's even the smallest amount incorrect. And on a smaller scale, that's kind of how I felt when I did all the financials for my business. Like, I'm not a CPA and I did all of our financials. And I would say every year to my CPA, I can be trained, but it's not intuitive to me what to do different. And so there is that difference. And I think even just having regular conversation with Gary about, like, what do you feel like your limitations are? How can we support that better is important.
I think the biggest risk, and just to be clear, I mean, every company has this risk. So that's not just school.
Yes, agreed.
As you know,
Right.
Tara, I mean, every company is required to have kind of a gap expert on for gap reporting, right? And so otherwise, you kind of miss have been changes in the pronouncements that might cause you to classify something different in any given year, which opens you up to misclassification. Now, misclassification is not that big of a deal.
Correct.
I mean, as we discussed, it's a bigger deal if you just aren't accounting for something. I don't think we're anywhere there, but that's the concern that I was wanting to raise, is just, do we need to think about how do we stay on top of those GASB pronouncements if they do change frequently?
Exactly.
And make sure that our financial statements specified.
Right.
That's helpful, thank you.
Yeah.
Right, thank you, Tara. Well, then we will let you go. I'm sure you have more exciting things to do with your night than attend fiscal accountability meetings. But thank you so much for meeting with us. This was really helpful, and I hope that that everyone watching here or watching subs or watching at a later date can feel confident that you've gone over the district's financial reporting and have answered all of our questions. And we thank you and your staff for all of your hard work.
Well, thank you. And I want to thank you for your time as well and allowing me to come here and talk. And all of you are incredibly smart and have incredibly good perspectives and questions. I'm really impressed with this committee. And it's not something that every district does, but I think it's really valuable and it'll be a value added for your district. So thank you for your time in having this committee as well.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of the night.
You too. Thanks.
Let them back in.
Yeah. Yeah, now I gotta tell you all the bad news.
I know. Already had a cut to the door.
Where you-
You
Uh, you were talking
did.
Tara had nothing but good things to say. So
Oh, good.
we are thankful for the great staff that we have. And everybody's hard work. Pulling all of this together in a year where there were a lot of additional work requirements. So in the interest of wrapping this up and allowing everybody to get on with their evening, a lot of these are procedural. It may be worth, I guess maybe what I will propose is jumping to plan, or maybe we'll just talk really briefly about what this committee could do going forward. I do think how are policies and procedures currently reviewed by? So just looking through PCI systems, grant compliance, things like.
They don't typically review that stuff. Those are staff level decisions. There could be a policy level decision which said all credit card systems shall be PCI compliant. I don't know if there is or isn't one. I don't believe there is one, but we are PCI compliant.
And so and maybe it would make sense for us to table a lot of this, because I know that we've talked about doing a review of the district's insurance requirements and things related to like cybersecurity or other insurance contracts that we're subject to. I think looking at policies and procedures a little more broadly and coming up with a list of, what things we want to be in scope or out of scope or reviewed on an annual basis or maybe a rolling basis, that could be something that this committee does. Once we get to the end of the year and we want to start reporting out about how the bond levy funds were used by the school, as well as, I guess when I think of reporting there, I think of kind of a two-pronged. One, making it clear to everyone how funds that flow into Sherwood schools compare to peer districts that I think members of our community expect out of a school system. And then also how those funds are flowing. So the levy funds are flowing out. What are they being used to fund? What are the things that Sherwood Public Schools are able to do with the bond levy that we would not be able to do without? So those are kind of the three things that I can think of over the next year. Insurance, probably with an eye towards cybersecurity, because that's probably
what
what
I that, and I think it's good that people know what we're doing, and I think it's good we make sure we're doing what we need to do.
And I think it's good to have a committee that can push.
Yeah,
I mean,
I agree.
we all have cybersecurity, we all have to do cybersecurity things at work that are annoying and that we grumble and gripe about. Sometimes it's helpful to have people from the outside pushing changes that are important to make, and so hopefully we can start that conversation here. Insurance, cybersecurity, other policies and procedures, that's kind of TBD, and then we'll probably scope in bond levy reporting for the end of fiscal 23-24, which will be the first year that includes bond levy dollars.
Very much in line with what I was thinking.
Perfect. Any other things people are thinking about or that we should have on the agenda either now or into the future?
No, I just, for 1 second, would love though to circle back.
Oh, yeah.
Just to, not that I couldn't have this conversation with you later, but just in the spirit of transparency, one of the things we did discuss with Tara was, she had talked about how you were very good at being strategic and forward thinking and a problem solver and always wanting to learn and all the things. But just to keep in mind that what are GASB requirements?
Oh, yeah.
As those grow and change, to make sure that you feel supported in being able to do those things and that we keep an eye on, do we need to have another controller or somebody in the office who has that accounting experience to support you? And so I was just saying that that's totally in line with conversations we've had in the past. And we can continue to have that conversation about, you know, do you feel supported? Is that something the district needs to put more money towards? To ensure you're able to do your job correctly.
I appreciate that, and we did just hire another staff member to our department. We hired a kind of a lower level staff member and people moved up, and that will allow Stephanie more time to serve in the role, getting certified payroll and a bunch of those things off of her plate and allowing her to serve more as like the lead accountant for the district. Will help us short term as long as she's with us, and then when she moves on, we'll look to hire a controller in that position at that time, and so.
Well, I think maybe another way to think about it too, and I mean, great point is, you know, with a lot of public companies, they always have a gap specialist, you know, gap accountant versus gap announcements. Oftentimes you can even get that gap as a service option as well, where you're just able to dial into or look up through a subscription-based plan. And what are kind of common business cases, classifying certain assets or what have you, that also can be that sounding board. So maybe there's, even if it's the case where you can't afford a position or a person, there's maybe a service or subscription that might fill in some of that GASB. I mean, I'm acutely aware of how much those pronouncements change and how misclassifications can happen very easily when something that might be classified as an absence or an asset is also an expense, right? Because the government's changed the policy, right? And so just being aware of those things, maybe there's a service as well that continues to give the staff a mechanism to continue education, but also how is it being done in the industry that is helpful as a solution.
And I guess the one thing, because in a prior life was an auditor, so I speak auditor. Auditors will never tell you that things are fine.
That's right.
They'll only tell you that things are.
That's right.
And so what we were told was that we don't have a problem, but because we have a CFO that is operationally and
I'm not.
exemplarily operationally oriented and not an accountant. That is something that we should keep in. And just monitor. It's on have it on the list of things to monitor, but not that there was a pressing issue.
No, she was very complimentary, but I just felt like this is the place to like share that openly.
Yeah.
And I know we would have that conversation anyway in the future, so it's not a secret, but
We'll watch it later.
yeah. I mean, just go back, you go on to all meetings. Anyways, but I know it's something you're obviously very aware of on your
Right.
own, and you have been in conversations anyways. So that's something we'll continue to check in about.
I appreciate that, and we have used a consultant as a third party person who is very aware of all the issues we need to work with, and I think one mistake we honestly made is I don't think we engaged them enough in the end of last year and when we were in the thick of stuff and in preparing for this audit. And I think that's a mistake that I won't make again, because some of the things in here, I think not only would have been caught, but would have been an opportunity to catch them and an opportunity to learn about the process for making sure things are classified correctly and some of these errors didn't happen. And in all honesty, I'm probably going to save myself a ton of work, because I guarantee you there's a faster way to reconcile capital assets than the way I lumbered away at it. And so I think that's a really key point, because I don't think a sixth person makes sense in our department. I think it would be, at least right now, maybe if these standards continue to grow, that changes. But I do think engaging, making sure we're continuing to learn and have a backstop and a sounding board is really important.
Right.
A lot of those challenges sometimes are just even implementation guidance. I mean, you might understand the GASB standard, but how it's implemented and how it's applied and what portion of revenue applies to this versus this or expense applies this. That's something you kind of have to, unless you've got somebody who's always versed in the GASB standard, it's very hard to get it right. So that's another thing to think about is, well, how do we fill that gap? How can we fill that gap as we go through?
And OASBO is a just be a part of that. It's the emails that come through
Yeah.
and people's questions and sharing and especially this last GASB, I mean, they were saying even different auditors were disagreeing
Yeah.
on how to even go about this. And so a lot of it, sometimes it's just working with the auditors on what they really want us to do and how to go about that. And that's the one good thing I think about the auditors that we have is they are very helpful to us and trying to work with us in that way too. So,
That's for sure.
yeah.
And the OASBO is the Oregon Association of School Business Officials. And it's actually a really collaborative group, one of the more collaborative groups I've been a part of, and people really do go out of their way to, in fact, we received just yesterday a summary of the new GASB on certain risk disclosures. And it was forwarded by another member, and she's like deep in that stuff, and she presents at all the conferences, and really is super helpful. So we have that as a resource as well, which we definitely tap into, but that can't solve our problem of how do we solve this granular
Yeah.
piece, right?
Any other? So just to put a bow around the conversation, I do just want to remind everybody who may be listening in now or in the future, all the issues we were talking about over the course of the night only relate to the preparation of this document that gets sent out to the financial markets or the state of Oregon or any of the other external stakeholders that Sherwood Public Schools may be working with. None of these issues relate to like the operational concerns of the school board or the community, or maybe if there's some member of the GASB that lives in Sherwood somewhere. They are very concerned, but we will continue to monitor, and that's the purpose of this committee, and things will evolve over time. I guess I'll conclude with one last comment for anybody who listens now and in the future. If there are things that you're interested in communicating to this committee or asking from this committee, we are very open for feedback. So feel free to reach out to the district, and we're happy to be open and transparent and accountable in any way that we can.
What about this last planning for presentation of audit to the board of directors?
Oh, so is the auditor going to present to the board, and then I'll present for the committee?
We can certainly do that. We can certainly do that.
Or was that not, is it just gonna be me?
I guess this committee needs to make that decision. I'm sure Claudia would be happy to come back and make her presentation. Or this couple members of this committee could put together a brief presentation to present the audit. And I have no preference either way.
I just couldn't remember. I wasn't necessarily
I think they
suggesting.
could do it both ways in my research.
I think it's fine.
I nominate these two to come give a presentation.
Okay, no,
Second, need a second?
I've already told Gary that I would present,
Typically, since the auditors generally work on kind of a billing cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If we don't have to spend the money, let's not do it.
Yeah.
Um,
You both seem very adequately prepared to repeat anything that Tara shared with us this evening.
I guess what I would propose is, because Tara organized her presentation to our committee around the management letter. We can read that we can make that available, and I'll just go through the highlights of that letter. And then just kind of provide a quick summary of what we talked about and how.
Are you good with doing that? Do you want to do it together? What role do you want me to play? This is a new.
I'm fine doing it.
Yeah, so why don't you take us right at it? Yeah. And we can brainstorm with the DB, and then we can have Gary go down.
Oh, yeah. No,
It sounds great.
I think it can be, one of the benefits of us doing this meeting here is that you don't have to go into. We can go into as much detail as people want, but we don't have to go into additional detail.
Agreed. And as board chair, do you feel comfortable with that plan?
Totally. And I actually love that, well, it would be the same if any board member sat through this, but it's kind of nice to hear Tara's perspective and the questions that were asked here and then hear your presentation, so that if there's gaps or questions that like an average person would want answered, then I can ask those.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's
no,
great.
great plan.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for your time.
Well, this is my job.
I know.
This is what I
Well, you
do.
do a good job. Good job. Thank you guys for your time.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sure you have to officially.
Oh,
Yeah, you're official.
I will formally adjourn our meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Or, I know, exactly.